Hello everyone, GoldenNova here. For this month's Quasar Commander video, the holder of that most vaunted of tiers wanted me to make whatever I felt like, an opportunity I always appreciate. And while I would love to talk everyone's ear off about the Legend of Dragoon for a second time, I think it's better to rectify a mistake I made and cover something in celebration of a recent milestone. Premiering in the May 2011 core set Extreme Victory, Meklords arrived as a group of anti-synchro cards, mirroring their part in the story of 5Ds. Like we talked about in Yusei Explained, NRD is a naturally occurring force that's controlled by synchro summoning. But as its usage became more widespread, many sought to exploit it for their own ends. But NRD has a will of its own, and in response to being overclocked for the desires of humans for the better part of 200 years, it manifested the Meklords as a countermeasure, and began the wholesale eradication of humanity. You know, typical immune system stuff. I bet your body is doing something like that right now. Because of this, the Meklords have a robust suite of effects meant to either defeat or neutralize synchro monsters, though at the cost of not having any extra tools for the other extra deck types, but against certain matchups they can be a huge pain. So let's assemble our army to see what they can do, see how these anti-synchros sync up, then find some unwitting pawns for our emperors to use against the forces of humanity. It's time to get into a mechanical rhythm with Meklords. Today's episode is brought to you by my lovely patrons and the fine people over at Dragon Shield. If you want to protect your cards with the strongest scales on the market that even come with their own lore while supporting the channel, use my affiliate link in the description. So what's the deal with Meklords? Well, aside from their anti-synchro capabilities, they're all machine-type monsters, and are split into three general categories. The Army, which are the Grunts, Emperors, each of which being an ace monster for a member of the three pure nobles of Iliaster, and the Astros, which are even further ascended Meklords that are unlocked once the nobles reform into Aporia. Spoilers, by the way, for 5Ds. They're also divided into three houses: Skiel, Granel, and Wissel. But that serves as more of an aesthetic purpose than a mechanical one. So, with all of that on the table, let's start by covering the ground forces first, before tackling the more powerful engines of destruction. Meklord Army of Granel is a level 4 Earth monster with 1600 attack and 1200 defense, and this card gains 100 attack for each Meklord monster on the field, except this card. And when this card is normal summoned, you can target a face-up monster your opponent controls and have that target's attack until the end of the turn. This makes Army Granel a pretty neat monster if you need to run something else over by battle, as only monsters bigger than 3200 can survive a bare bones Granel. And while it can only activate its effect on normal summon, making it a bit harder to weave into normal lines of play, as an Earth machine, I wouldn't be surprised if it could be adapted into the opening plays of an Infinitrack line. And considering all the Infinity imagery we've got going on, I couldn't ask for a more flavorful interaction. Meklord Army of Skiel is a level 4 wind monster with 1200 attack and 1000 defense that gains 200 attack for each Meklord monster on the field except this card. And when this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the grave, you can special summon a Meklord Army monster from your deck. Right off the bat, I'm pretty iffy of anything that requires battle destruction, but it gets even worse when you realize that its pool of targets is actually very shallow, with an actual good one only showing up after the Rage of Ra support came out. Its attack scaling is better, but its base stats are much lower, meaning you're gonna need at least 2 other Meklords on the field to be on par with just base Army Granel. I'm sure you can find some convoluted combo to utilize this card with, but much like the card itself, that'd be a bit too much blue skyling. Meklord Army of Wissel is a level 4 dark monster with 1800 attack and 0 defense that gains 100 attack for each Meklord monster on the field except this card. Once per turn, when another Meklord monster you control would declare an attack on a defense position monster your opponent controls, you can activate this effect, giving that attacking monster piercing battle damage for that battle. You know, most cards would make this a continuous effect, but Army Wissel just had to make it more difficult and make it a weird activated effect that, for all intents and purposes, works the exact same, but opens it up to activation negation. Heck, it doesn't even let itself do piercing damage, someone else has to do it for them. And it's only once per turn! It may have the highest base attack of our entire army lineup, but relying on it to carry us to victory wouldn't be very wisel. Meklord Army Deployer Obligato is a level 4 light monster with 1200 attack and 1800 defense, and during your main phase you can activate this effect. Destroy this card, and if you do, special summon 2 Meklord army monsters from your deck in defense position, except a copy of this card. Also, you can't special summon monsters for the rest of the turn except machines. If this card is sent to the grave, you can activate this effect. During the end phase of this turn, you can inflict 100 points of damage to your opponent for each Meklord monster you control. That burn damage is a little funky, but is more of an anime reference than anything else. The important part is the summon spamming, because not only does this help get more names into rotation, you also get more material for your plays. While you're locked into machine monsters, summoning 2 Granels gets you access to Ancient Gear Ballista, which is a combo machine all on its own. Any 2 of them can make Platinum Gadget to deploy more armies from your hand. Cliffort Genius gets you Effect Negation, Gear Gigant X gets you a Search and Recycle, as well as Springans Merrymaker, which can evolve into Gigantic Champion Sargus. And if any of those exceeds battle, you can rank him up into Zeus. There's so much value here, you're basically obligatoed to play it. Alright, that's about it for the armies. Now it's time to cover the Emperors, but first, a quick detour into a monster that doesn't technically fit into any of the established categories, but is basically Emperor support. Meklord Nucleus Infinity Core is a level 1 dark monster with 0 attack and defense, and the first time this card would be destroyed by battle each turn, it is not. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can add a Meklord Spell or Trap card from your deck to your hand, and if this card is destroyed by a card effect, you can special summon a Meklord Emperor from your hand or deck with a different attribute from the monsters you control, ignoring summoning conditions. Also, for the rest of the turn, you can only declare an attack with 1 monster. This is another new piece of support and is basically the new bread and butter of the deck. Not only does it grab support both new and old, it helps deploy our big bosses without having to worry about their pesky summoning conditions. And thankfully, one of the cards we can search immediately enables that effect, so it's a self-contained engine that can act as a bit of a blocker in an emergency. I could tell you that this card is central to your strategy, but it's already doing that for me. It is the core, after all. Okay, let's get back on track and talk about the Emperors. Each one can't be normal summoned or set, and must be special summoned by its own effect, and can't be summoned by other ways. Unless you're like Infinity Core and can just ignore that. When a face-up monster you control is destroyed by a card effect and sent to the grave, except during the damage step, you can special summon this card from your hand. So it's actually quite simple, and with a wealth of options at our disposal, destroying your own monsters isn't going to be that hard. They can also, once per turn, target a synchro monster your opponent controls and equip that target to that Emperor, and it gains the combined attack of all monsters equipped to it by this effect. And unlike Relinquished, they don't have an upper limit on the number of monsters they can absorb, so if you're up against a synchro strategy, over a few turns, these monsters can get pretty beefy. First up is Meklord Emperor Granel, a level 1 Earth monster with 0 attack and defense, and it gains attack and defense equal to half your life points, and can target 1 monster equipped to it by its own effect and special summon it to your field in defense position. That's right, if you need another body for whatever reason, Emperor Granel just hands it over to you, no questions asked. It's also probably our beefiest Meklord, though it does incentivize you to not play cards that cost life points, like the Solemns. It's a small thing to consider, but when it comes to this archetype, you've really got to get granular about the details. Meklord Emperor Skiel is a level 1 wind monster with 2200 attack and defense, and while on the field, other monsters you control can't declare an attack. And you can send a monster you control that is equipped to this card to the grave, and this card can attack your opponent directly this turn. Yeah, now we're getting a bit of that Malefic flavoring here. If somehow your boosted Skiel isn't large enough to run over a monster, or you just need to poke directly for 2200 to close things out, you can send the equipped synchro to the grave to make that happen. Though it doesn't specify you have to send a monster equipped to it by its own effect, so if Union Carrier ever comes back, keep it in mind. But because it limits your attacks and doesn't do anything otherwise to help, it's not exactly a popular option during deck building, so don't expect it to Skiel any wins anytime soon. Meklord Emperor Wissel is a level 1 dark monster with 2500 attack and defense that also keeps other monsters you control from declaring attacks. And once per turn during either player's turn when your opponent activates a spell card, you can negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. Hey, now that's actually pretty snazzy. It's got a great body and can negate a spell once per turn for free. This is much more useful than Skiel, especially if you've already attacked in a turn, and if the attack limiter is getting bothersome, linking it away isn't much of an issue. It is a level 1 monster after all. I also like that even though this is supposed to be an emperor of a mechanical army meant to destroy all of humanity, it's posed in just a way that looks like they just recognized you from across the street, and they know they should recognize who you actually are, but are still grasping for what your name is, so they're giving an awkward little hide to, like, acknowledge you. It's very imposing for what amounts to the 5D's version of a Terminator. But it's gonna get a second chance at a first impression with its new signature attack card, Meklord Emperor Wissel, Synchro Absorption. It's also a level 1 dark monster with 2500 attack and defense, and breaks a few of the established Emperor conventions. Like the rest, it also can't be normal summoned or set, as well as needing to be summoned by its own effect, but it's a quick effect that sends a face-up Meklord monster you control to the grave to special summon this card from your hand during your opponent's turn, which allows you to be a bit more proactive with it. If this card is special summoned, you can target a monster your opponent controls and it can't attack for the rest of the turn. And when a card or effect is activated that would destroy any number of cards on the field as a quick effect, you can tribute this card to negate that activation, and if you do, destroy that card. Now, that effect, combined with the art, might give away that this is Wissel after it's absorbed Yusei's iconic Stardust Dragon. It also comes with some of the Emperor parts that were in the anime, which is why 2 of the 3 Emperors don't allow you to attack with other monsters, because in the anime, those zones are actually all filled up. As for the card itself, it's a pretty solid addition. It blanks a card's attack for the turn, you gain some destruction protection, and you can use this to have your Meklords dodge targeted interaction. True, it's only during your opponent's turn, so it doesn't really work against things like Valor, but if your opponent tries to do anything on their own turn, you can just send them out of the way to put absorption on field, and now you're online. It's no hyper-efficient boss monster, but it does a great job at helping you maintain your field and lets you attack with other monsters while it's on the field, which is a huge plus. It's just weird that the card named Synchro Absorption lacks the Synchro Absorbing effect. I know it's already supposed to thematically have Stardust Dragon, but I've never seen a Meklord that was satisfied with just one snack. That about does it for the Emperors, but what do they mean to a god? Let me tell you with the Meklord Astros. First up is Meklord Astro Dragon Asterisk, a level 10 dark monster with 0 attack and defense that can't be normal summoned or set, and must be special summoned from your hand by controlling 3 or more Meklord monsters. When this card is special summoned, you can target any number of Meklord monsters you control, except this card, send those targets to the grave, and if you do, this card's attack becomes the combined original attack of the monster sent to the grave by this effect. And each time a Synchro monster is special summoned, the summoning player is burned for 1000 damage. So you can either just summon this and leave it on board to punish someone for Synchro summoning, although it's going to be pretty easy to run over, or you can feed it any number of your Meklords so it remains a threat. And remember, it only checks if a Synchro monster is special summoned, so if your opponent revives them or pulls it right out of the extra deck, it'll still incur the burn. Though be careful, when it comes to sending Meklords to the grave, it checks for original attack, so don't send Emperor Granel to the grave thinking you're about to get a huge payoff. If anything, this is a way to get your other Emperors off the board while keeping their attack power in play, which helps you push for damage since Asterisk doesn't have an attack restriction. But my question is, what in the heck is up with the theming? I mean, Asterisks are just the little things that are used to rat out the fine print, so it's weird enough to see it as part of the big bad's big boss. But as an avid Bravely Default enjoyer, all of those jobs are called Asterisks. What is the history here? Meklord Astro Mechanical is a level 12 light monster with 4000 attack and defense that also can't be normal summoned or set, and must be special summoned from the hand by sending 3 Meklord monsters from your hand to the grave, and cannot be special summoned by other ways. Like the Emperors, it can equip an opponent's Synchro monster once per turn, and gains the combined attack of all monsters equipped to it by its effect. And once per turn, during your standby phase, you can send one of those equipped monsters you control to the grave to burn your opponent for damage equal to that monster's original attack, but you cannot conduct your battle phase the turn you activate this effect. So you summon what I can only describe as a knockoff Megaduce the size of Obelisk, get even bigger by taking one of your opponent's Synchros, swing in for potentially a ton of damage, then potentially win the game on the spot during your next standby phase by burning for a whole bunch of damage when you send that Synchro to the grave. Sounds good in theory, until you realize you've now pitched 3 cards in hand for a monster that has no protection, isn't a guaranteed payoff since not everyone's going to be on synchros, and has a burn you might not even want to use since it isn't always going to just win you the game. So while the stat line is impressive, I'm going to have to give it a pass, which is a real shame. I know Aporia clearly spent a lot of time on their mech Sona. Meklord Astro Dragon Triskelion is a level 10 dark monster with 3000 attack and 0 defense, can't be normal summoned or set, and must first be special summoned from your hand by banishing 3 Meklord monsters with different names from your grave. Once per turn, when this card declares an attack, you can look at your opponent's extra deck and equip a monster from it to this card. This card gains attack equal to the combined attack of those equipped monsters, and while this card is equipped with a Synchro monster, this card can make up to 3 attacks on monsters during each battle phase. This is one of the newer pieces of support the theme has and easily overshadows every other Astro monster we have. Thanks to Obligado, it's unreasonably simple to meet the 3 monster requirement, it doesn't apply any restrictions, and is not dependent on your opponent running any synchros. It simply gets better if they are, gifting you that nifty triple attack on monsters. But in the absence of that, you can still just take one of their big bunguses and swing in for a lot of damage. And then there's all the niche stuff you can do with it as well, like how the summon isn't once per turn, so you can access things like Gustav Max if you summon 2 of them in the same turn. If you play this deck, aim to make this early and often, because it's the quickest and easiest way to wear down your opponent. And that's even before we factor in all the damage you can do once you generate infinite +1/+1 counters. Alright, that's all of our monsters, now it's time for the spells and traps, starting with Boon of the Meklord Emperor, a normal spell card that you can only activate if the only face-up monsters on the field are 2 Meklord monsters. You draw 2 cards, and you can't conduct your battle phase the turn you activate this card. Oh wow, this card sucks. Like, it doesn't even check just your field, it's the entire field. So if your opponent has literally any face-up monsters, you can't play this. Unless you're in the world's strangest mirror match, that is. Sure, it's a pot of greed, but the only way you're resolving this is if you opened Obligado and this turn 1. Boon of the Meklord Emperor, more like Buffoon of the Meklord Emperor. Ha, got him! Reboot is a normal spell card that shuffles a Meklord monster from your hand into the deck, then targets a Meklord card in your grave and adds it to your hand. This can even get your name stamped spells and traps, which is kinda nice, but it better be a good one since you are going -1 to resolve this effect. Yeah, it couldn't just allow you to grab a card out of the graveyard, that would be too much. Better make sure we curb the power level on this one. This seriously feels like it should have been printed as a continuous spell card. A once per turn activation might have saved this. But as it is now, you won't need a warning of this card showing up because it has no game incoming. Meklord Deflection is a quick play spell card that targets a Meklord monster you control. Your opponent takes no battle damage from attacks involving that face-up monster until the end of the turn. Also, its attack permanently becomes the combined original attack of all Meklord monsters you currently control. And if any number of Meklord monsters you control would be destroyed by a battle or card effect, you can banish this card from your grave instead. This is kind of a substitute for playing Asterisk, as it makes one of your monsters about as big as it would be without sacrificing anything, and is even a weird way to bypass the you can't attack with other monsters restrictions of Skeel and Wissel, since now those Emperors are essentially carrying the rest of the team on their back, Sirocco style. And while it can't damage your opponent that turn, because it keeps the attack power, you can just swing in with it on following turns, potentially closing out the game. The Grave effect is nice too, covering up for the fact that older bosses didn't really come packaged with a way to protect your investment. This is a solid addition to the theme, raising its grade from a D-flexion to a C+ flexion. Meklord Assembly is a continuous spell card, and when activated, adds a Meklord monster from your deck to your hand. It can discard a card to target a monster you control and destroy it, and if any number of face-up Meklord monsters you control are destroyed by a battle or card effect, you can target one other face-up spell or trap card on the field and destroy it. Okay, so why in the world do you have to discard to destroy your own cards? Well, remember that your Emperors can be summoned whenever your cards are popped, so this effectively acts as an enabler. But you don't have to pop just any card, since what you search off of Assembly will, more than likely, be Infinity Core, which you can normal summon to get another Meklord spell or trap card, then pop Core with Assembly, getting you a free Meklord Emperor, as well as summoning one from hand if you already have one. And if you started that combo line by normal summoning Core, you might actually have one, and then you get a face-up spell or trap card pop for your troubles, letting you deal with floodgates and field spells. This is another essential piece of Meklord support, getting you Emperor Granel or Wissel early on so you can press the advantage and get your board set up, though there is some assembly required. The Resolute Meklord Army is a continuous spell card that keeps all your attack position Meklord Army monsters you control from being destroyed by battle. Also, their effects are negated. Okay. Why? What's the point of this? It's not like they have any drawbacks that we'd want to get rid of, and it gets in the way of using Army Granel, which has the best effect aside from Obligato, which thankfully isn't really affected by this. They may be resolute, but being determined doesn't mean you're smart. Fortissimo, the Mobile Fortress, is a field spell card that, once per turn, can special summon a Meklord Army monster from your hand. Neat! This seems to be where Obligato gets its influence from, though the monster has easily the better effect. Since all the army monsters are level 4, this can help you turbo out some rank 4s, but it's really only helpful in getting Obligato into play without using your normal summon in case you have another one in mind, like Army Granel. But for something named Fortissimo, it sure seems quiet in here. Would it have been too much for them to jazz it up a little? Maybe even with some jazz? Meklord Fortress is a field spell card that keeps your Meklord Emperors from being targeted by the effects of Synchro monsters. And when this card on the field is destroyed and sent to the grave, you can add a Meklord Emperor from your deck to your hand. This will probably be your preferred field spell, if you even run one at all. Protection from targeted Synchro monster effects is the height of situational, and will probably only be useful as an incidental search when you pop it off of your own effects. And it only protects your Emperors. Your Army and Astro monsters are going to be left high and dry. In fact, with the amount of monsters that actually fit in this place, it's less of a fortress and more of a gazebo. Chaos Infinity is a normal trap card that changes as many defense position monsters on the field as possible to face up attack position, then special summons a Meklord monster from your deck or grave, but its effects are negated, also it's destroyed during the end phase. Now, it says any Meklord, but we know that it only means Meklord Army monsters, since the rest of them have summon restriction. And Chaos Infinity, despite the radical name, forgot to ignore summoning conditions. Heck, it even negates the effects of the monster it summons, so you can't even get out Obligato to flex into more monsters. The best we can do here is summon Core and get the On Destruction effect, but that doesn't take advantage of the forced attack part, so you'll want to use this when you have an offensive push ready to go. And all of that is a moot point if your opponent has no defense position monsters, because then you can't even activate this. All in all, this card is just unplayable. After all, if we, as a player base, trusted our opponent to act in a way that we want them to, we wouldn't play so many darn floodgates. Meklord Astro the Eradicator is a normal trap card that targets 3 Meklord monsters with different names in your grave and adds them to your hand, or special summons them ignoring summoning conditions. And until the end of the turn after this card is activated, you can't special summon monsters except machines. And if you control a Meklord Astro monster, you can banish this card from your grave to destroy a Synchro monster your opponent controls, and if you do, inflict damage to your opponent equal to its original attack. Hey, that's a pretty spicy card. It's either a triple reborn, or at the very least gets your cards back into rotation, though be wary. Flying Fortress Skyfire isn't good for much, but it does teach us that if a monster was summoned from a private information zone, like the hand, without fulfilling its summoning conditions, even if an effect ignores summoning conditions, you can't summon it from a public information zone, like the grave. If you want to revive your Meklord Emperors, you need to make sure they were summoned with their own effects, though, like we said earlier, that's not really a huge problem. But that speed bump aside, this is great for throwing out blockers, getting you Linker Xyz material, or just to help you summon Asterisk from your hand, like the card shows. And you have a loaded piece of Synchro removal in your grave once you have an Astro on board, potentially geared up to do a lot of damage. It's a fine card that helps grow your card economy to astronomical proportions. Meklord Factory is a normal trap card, and when a Meklord monster on the field is targeted for an attack, target a Meklord army monster in your grave and add that target to your hand, then destroy the attack target. This is useful for, attack target? Well, I guess this triggers your Meklord Emperor summon effects, though I feel like Factory should have been able to get you back a Meklord Emperor as well as an army, so that the effect is actually being set up. Notably though, it doesn't care who controls the Meklord that's being attacked, so you could find a way to give one to your opponent and get the effect that way, but who really wants to go through all that trouble just for a slower warrior returning alive, but for a third of our archetype? Cards like this are easily a major factory in why people don't respect this theme. Mech-Timed Blast is a normal trap card that targets a Meklord monster you control and a card your opponent controls and destroys them. Thank you! A nice, simple effect that enables your Emperors while removing problem cards. The only thing I could ask for is that this was actually a Meklord card, on the off chance you'd recycle it with something like Reboot. It's certainly no Icarus attack, but it's about mech time we had something like this. Alright, now that we've gone over our cards, here's a little combo line we can use to summon out our new favorite snack, Triskelion. All you need is one copy each of Obligato and Nucleus. First, you normal summon Obligato, using its effect to summon two different Meklord armies. I'd grab Granel and Wissel. Then, link them both into Platinum Gadget, and use its effect to summon your Nucleus. It'll search Assembly, which you can activate to search Triskelion. And with Obligato, Army Granel, and Wissel in Grave, you can banish them all for your big boss. From this point, if you have a spare card in hand, you can pop the Nucleus to get an Emperor Granel, and pop another face-up spell or trap card if you fancy. You don't necessarily have lethal, you do have a lot of damage on board, but Nucleus will restrict you from attacking with a single monster, but remember that a single monster doesn't mean a single attack. If your opponent has a Synchro monster in their extra deck, Triskelion is about to make quick work of an established board. And if you start with Triskelion in hand already, all you need at that point is the Obligato, in which case you can link into Clifford Genius to help ensure a safe landing for Triskelion. Alright, so that's all the Meklord cards, but what do we do with them? Well, the Emperors certainly didn't do the deck any favors. All of them have their own little thing that have very little synergy with each other, so Triskelion is the only concrete through line of a strategy that we have. This means our goal is to mobilize it and swing in for massive damage ASAP. So we'll be leaning on strong going second staples to clear the way for as much damage as possible, and using control tools like Emperor Wissel if we're forced to go first. So what can we play to help them out? While not all of our monsters are dark, we may want to consider splashing in some Orchest cards. Not only does Crescendo provide some excellent disruption that's easily searchable, it also searches Triskelion and Synchro Absorption. Not to mention that with how big Triskelion is, it makes for a good target or fodder for Orchest Nightmare. Machina are also a pretty cool consideration. Our Astros have big enough levels to act as monster reborns for Fortress, and Citadel is always popping machines to trigger the summons of our Emperors. Though be wary that they do miss timing, so if you use it as Chainlink 2 or higher, you won't get those summons. And if either of your Granels are destroyed, that brings Citadel right back. Machina Defense Perimeter is also an interesting include. While your Astros are on the field, your Army and Emperor monsters can't be targeted for attacks or card effects, meaning it already provides better protection than Meklord Fortress, and if a face-up machine monster you control is destroyed by a battle or card effect, you target a machine in your grave and add it back to your hand. This gives you a way to recycle all your important Meklords, so, you know, food for thought. Two more really good additions are Overdrive, which can get you access to Citadel very easily while being a great way to turn the banishes from Triskelion into a draw, and Machina Ruin Force. Any 3 armies in your grave give you the 12 levels you need to summon it, and now you have a pseudo Triskelion that works alongside it, as it'll give you material for that Gustav Max during main phase 2, and it even acts as protection for the battle phase effect, which makes it worse for your opponent if they resolve it because, you know, now half their life points are gone. As for going second board breakers, cards like Raigeki and Harpy's Feather Duster are go-to cards that never fail to impress. Lightning Storm is a pretty good mix of the two, but since we run Assembly, we might have an issue activating it during the late game, so maybe run a healthy mix of both. Dark Ruler No More and Evenly Matched should be avoided as they do skip your battle phase, something we can't really afford. Though if you're in a pinch, Dark Hole can work to enable your Emperors. As for a silly tech pick, if you don't mind the potential loss of 2,000 life points, Where Art Thou actually works pretty well for us. Play it while you have Nucleus on board and you can search any of your Emperors. Then you can pop Nucleus with Assembly and get 2 summon triggers. You can even get double Granel on board if you order your Chainlinks right. Make sure that Granel is at Chainlink 1 and Nucleus is at Chainlink 2, since it has to summon a monster of a different attribute from monsters you control, but Granel is under no such compunction. But remember that Nucleus does put you under a only one monster can attack restriction, so you might want to consider diversifying your lineup. Maybe a Granel for attacking, while summoning a Wissel for that spell negation. And hey, if you win that turn, you won't ever have to worry about that 2,000 damage. And that's all I have to say about Meklords. I'll admit, there was a surprising amount of depth in this theme that I wasn't expecting. True, a lot of that comes from newer cards that let you tap into that more effectively, but it was a solid base to build on nonetheless. I'd like to see some more long-term updates for the theme. A single wave isn't going to make it magically updated, but it's on the right track, and if we get more starters like Nucleus, and maybe even some more bosses like Triskelion, the deck will kick ass and take names, which is something we can lord over the competition. But now, I want to hear what you all have to say. Do you welcome our new mech overlords, or are synchro monsters the least of their worries? And which one is your favorite? Emperor Granel was this close, but something about their arms just doesn't click with me, so I'm giving this one to Army Granel. Something about them has big deskbot energy. Let me know in the comments, and if you haven't already, make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video with someone you know who loves Yu-Gi-Oh! It really does a lot to help me out. Today's episode was brought to you in part by Dragon Shield. When you want to protect your cards with the power of dragon scales, get some sweet lore for them, and support the channel, check out my link in the description to get started. Today's episode was also brought to you by my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commander Green Knight, Nebula Navigator's 3rd Dynasty, Ada Basilisk, Adam Zajdel, Andrew Newman, Avi Chali, Kane Senpai, Chibi Gohan, Danny Bound, Divine Dragon Felgrand 4123, Eric, Aaron the World Breaker, Frankie, Genesis Yu-Gi-Oh, Gloomba 331, Great Big Pillock, Hairbear, Harry the Ominous Benefactor, Howling Zangetsu, Iskander 711, John Manji, Jordan, Julius Sneezer, Mana Charge, Marluxia is a Girl, Nathan Vig, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, RJ the Jank Monarch, Sammy Haim, Sir Knight JCB, Skybuster Leo, Sophie, apparently, the Fresh Prince of Conair, the Charizard Flame, the Wizard Moose and Xander Wolfensberger, Cosmic Crusaders Almento 5010, Ariel Kersey, Bear Sharktopus Studios, Beluga Masta, Chaz Ghost, Chris Kessler, Corbinisms, Drachenwald, Emony, Eva Padilla, Herbal D, In the House Like Carpet, Inblink, Jester Designs, Kale the Dragon, Carp, Kevon Public, King Scarlet Yu-Gi-Oh, Lord Whoop-De-Doo, Manga Pages, Marion James E. Picata, Matt Simmons, Mega Combi, Michael Shimabukuro, Nadia McCarthy, Nitromo, Ruxith Sarani, Shizuka Nijimura, Star-Lord 777, Stephen Williamson, The Legendary Raven, Tucker Ordorn, and Zal Dreka, as well as the wonderful Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. If you'd like to be a part of these credits, help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, help keep the channel going, and participate in monthly custom card reviews, check out my Patreon link in the description, or consider becoming a YouTube member down below. And if you'd like to see another video about massive machines, check out this video I made covering trains, including some insight from the Earth Machine Master himself, Peeps Yu-Gi-Oh! Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Wow, that is terrible. Who chose that word? You can activate this effect, give burps. That's the effect, they're burping.